This and that and what the fuck else, episode 156. This episode I'm going to be talking about some stuff in the Donbass, gender, Middle East, Ukraine, and stuff on the Russophobia that is out of control. But let's start with Lake Elton in the Volgorod region. Interesting landscape that. I would like to know what the whole story is about that place. Let's kick off with Canada and look at this joke. That is that main clown, Justin Trudeau, the idiot from Canada, as Alex so frequently say. This is how Justin Trudeau talks to short people. What a fucking clown. That guy is the leader of that country. I wonder what Canadians think when they see shit like that. Then we get to the Donbass and look at this. In Yasnovatsky district, Donetsk Oblast, the school was destroyed as a result of AFU shelling. Look at those images. That is a school. But this is what the Western taxpayers finances in Ukraine. They've been financing this since 2014, and they don't care a bit. This is how your tax money is spent, shooting schools. And then we get to this guy. I like him a lot, Ramzan Kadyrov. And my Zazi stalker a while back sent me a photograph which was clearly photoshopped, and he reckoned that this guy is on his last legs. He's been poisoned and he's going to die. So, stalker, you missed out on this one. Kadyrov enjoys himself riding a tank. Nothing else to add. He's an epic in his own right. And then we get to this. And I've mentioned it many times in my Skidmarks. The Battle of Bakhmut is at its climax. Never forget that the armed forces of Ukraine, backed entirely by NATO and the United States, could not defeat Wagner PMC. That is, I think that's a bitter pill to swallow, that a PMC is giving NATO and Ukraine hell. Embarrassing, actually. The next images is very disturbing. You look at the first image, that was Bakhmut, May 2022. Look at that. Trees and houses and streets and buildings, and looks quite organized and looks great. And 1 year later, look at that. That is what's left of that city. Now, there are people that will say, yes, it's the Russians that has been doing it. The fact of the matter is, this is what Ukraine does. They fortify themselves in cities and in towns. They put their firing points in schools and hospitals, in malls, everywhere. That is against the international law. But who cares? Zelensky is the West's favorite pet, and he can do what he like. The nightmare that you must try and imagine is many of those buildings that are so blown up. There are people, Russian people, citizens, in the basements. The Ukrainians didn't let them out. kept them in there as human shields. And Wagner has been rescuing people out of those buildings. Think about that one. And then this is quite a disturbing thing that I saw. This is a projected forecast to 2028 of what percentage of ages 65 and older in each country. So that's a percentage of the population that will be over 65. Look at that. Japan, 30%. Italy, 26%. And the list just goes on and on. You can stop it if you want to look at it. The United States is estimated at 18%, China at 15%, India at 8%. That is, they are okay. They are okay. Because this aging of the population doesn't spell good things. Debt and demographics set to doom Europe starting in the late 2020s to 2030s. Instead of trying to get ahead of the looming fiscal reckoning, rapid aging will bring Europe is ramping up spending in a host of areas. And they pump money into the defense spending, they pump money into all types of projects like Ukraine and so forth, just running their debt up. This writer estimates that by 2030s they will all be over 200% debt to GDP ratio and in years of recession. Super age Europe is just around the corner, right at the time when Germany, France, Italy and the Netherlands will be expected to foot much of the bill for much of the post-war Ukrainians' reconstruction and EU integration, on top of climate and defense spending. Europe is done. You may not agree with me, but this is what I'm telling you. Europe is done. Those people are their leaders. The leadership is a lot of idiots. There's no other word for it. And I have said it a time or two in some of my earlier Skidmarks. In 2007 I was in the Middle East, and one night we were sitting there in the desert having a braai, and the guy from one of the banks was sitting next to me, and he turned to me and he said to me, "Mr. Klein, Europe is in the shit." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, according to our estimates, in 10 to 15 years, they're not going to be able to pay their pensions anymore." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because they mismanaged the pension funds and their workforce age is changing rapidly. Youngsters coming into, there's a lot less youngsters coming into the place, and people are living longer than what they used to. And that whole combination is going to make it impossible for them to meet their pension obligations." And I said, "What are they going to do?" And he looked me straight in the face and said, "They're going to kill the old people." Well, think what happened during the pestilence. And then we get to this gender thing, and this is in the UK. Scary numbers. According to the survey, more than half of the teenagers in the UK, 54%, know someone who is transgender or about to be. These numbers clearly show how deeply transgender activism has penetrated the Western educational system. In European schools, children are taught that gender is assigned at birth, that women can have a penis, and that men have the right and ability to bear children. I've got bad news for the UK. You have been invaded. And when those WEF soldiers gets the instruction to do their job in your country, it is shit like this that is supposed to defend you. You are doomed. And then we have this. Ugandan economist and author Eli Twinio Kamigusha couldn't have said it better. When you discover that you are riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount, bury the horse and get a living horse. However, in Africa, more advanced strategies are often employed, such as 1. Buying a stronger whip. 2. Appointing a committee to study the horse. 3. Changing riders. 4. Arranging to visit other countries to see how other cultures ride dead horses. 5. Lowering the standards so that the dead horse can be included. 6. Reclassifying the dead horse as a living impaired. 7. Hiring outside contractors to ride the dead horse. 8. Harnessing several dead horses together to increase speed. 9. Providing additional funding to increase dead horses' performance. 10. Rewriting the expected performance requirement for all horses. 11. Promoting the dead horse to the supervisory position. Sad but true, applicable to South Africa as well. Then we get to the Middle East. Influential Middle East leader woos Russia and China testing the US ties. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, you can stop it if you want to, but this is from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. And the Americans is not happy about this. How dare this country do something that is good for them and not good for the US? Think about that. And then we get to this one, also from the Middle East. US occupation plunders tons of Syrian oil from Al Jazeera region. Hasakasana, the US occupation troops, continue to plunder Syrian wealth as over the past hours, tanks loaded with hundreds of tons of stolen oil from Al Jazeera region headed towards the Iraqi territory. And you can stop it if you want to read the whole thing. But this is what they're doing. This is what they are doing in Syria. Stealing the Syrians' oil. 80% of the Syrian production is stolen by the United States. And then we get this, which makes the guys in the shithouse in Washington puke. History is being made. President Assad is in Saudi Arabia to participate in the Arab League summit after 12 years of Arab boycott. Arab countries are neglecting Western warnings and threats against those who normalize with Damascus. A new era has begun. That is. And then we have this little bit of wisdom. The ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about, yet refuse to investigate. Dr. Wayne Dyer. Ignorance, the root and stem of all evil. Although there is an important difference between ignorance and stupidity, ignorance is not knowing. Stupidity is not wanting to know. Ignorance can be cured by education, logic, and reason. Stupidity can't. And let me tell you, I've got first-hand experience of this with that pet Nazi of mine. This is so applicable to him. And then we get to the Russophobia. And once again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm just going to give you the headline. But this is that woman, Prime Minister Kaja Kallas. Now, the levels of Russophobia out of the Baltics is mind-blowing. I have spoken about it. They're breaking down Russian statues and destroying the memorials for the Russian soldiers. They are forcing Russian citizens not to speak Russian. All types of crap like that. Listen to this madness that this chick is coming out with now. Now, I wouldn't like to take a guess on her IQ, but look at that face. She's also got Jens Stoltenberg's position in NATO in her sights. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas said that the Russians should pay reparations and repent to the West. The recognition of national guilt and the acceptance of personal responsibility, for it is basis for a society to have a future. It is also the basis for breaking the vicious circle of violence and aggression in Russia. We all read Russian history these days, reading to try to understand their crimes and the rationale behind the killing machine, Callas said. Callas complains that her family was deported in 1948 to Siberia. And then it continues, and apparently the people that were sent to Siberia were Nazi supporters. So, and the guy ends it and he said, "We think Callas and the Estonians should apologize, repent and pay reparations to Russia." And I think that is a correct way to go for it. But the trouble for this cocky Baltics is, PMC Wagner will take them down. And then we get to this crazy guy. This is the guy that said so proudly and boldly, there will be no off-ramp for Russia. I wonder who's looking for an off-ramp. The US Secretary of State spoke about recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Never say never. The US Secretary of State replied to the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham's suggestion during a US congressional hearing that Russia could be recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism. How does a terrorist state supply Europe with gas? Is a question. But this is coming from the main global terrorist regime. But I have read articles where the guys were discussing the thing. The problem is if they declare Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, they've got a hell of a lot of laws that will then prevent them from importing stuff from Russia, and it kills all diplomatic. It's a major thing. It's a major thing for them. But this crazy guy, he thinks it's good to do it. And here's something that will make that Lindsay most probably have a heart attack. The news is like an anecdote. A village for American immigrants will be built near Moscow. The project is being paid for by Future Immigrants, a partner of Vista Immigration. Beslangerov estimates that tens of thousands of people would like to move to Russia. The reason is the imposition of new radical values. For those who doubt it, here's the link, and then there was an article about this. But is this an anecdote or a new reality about to dawn? And just today, I spoke to a guy on WhatsApp that moved. It's a South African guy that moved to Europe, and he married a Russian girl, and they were living in the Netherlands. And then when the lockdown stuff started, they decided to move to Russia. And he told me a few interesting things. I will share some of the stuff at a later stage. I'm waiting for the first wave, serious wave, of people moving to Russia, Europeans moving to Russia. And then we get to the sanctions, and here is that weakling from Germany. German government wants pragmatic measures to prevent the circumvention of sanctions imposed on Russia, Schulz said in Reykjavik. According to Reuters, his words appear to temper US calls for a more wide-ranging ban on exports. New measurements will include targeting sanctions evasion involving the third countries, officials familiar with the talks have said, the agency reminds. These people are totally bonkers. They have destroyed their economies with the sanctions against Russia. Now they want to destroy other third world countries that are doing business with Russia. Their sanctions is a total bullshit story, and it was basically economical suicide. And there are people that manage to find ways around it. Now they want to go for that people. It's not a good thing that 80% of the economy has been fucked. They want to fuck it 100%. Somebody should help them out. And then we get this from the Ukraine. This is for that Nazi stalker of mine that used to tell me how well it's going in Ukraine and what a great country it is. Ukrainian recruitment officers gather volunteers from rural areas, everybody to the meat grinder. And this was in response to that shit that Zelensky goggled out on a TV program in Italy, where he claimed that the volunteers are standing queues to join the Ukraine army. And you must look at this. This is absolutely sickening. This is the gift that Zelensky gave the Pope. An icon depicting a void instead of baby Jesus. What the hell is that? What is that? What? And then we get to America. This was on American TV. This could have been a what a fuck moment. One of the women saw a Russian drone from the balcony and immediately grabbed a jar of tomatoes, threw it and knocked the drone down. Maybe only Ukrainian women can shoot down drones with jars of tomatoes. We have a lot of stories like that. Olena Zelenska. That is Zelensky's wife talking that shit on a TV program in America, and that Hillary Clinton sat there smiling broadly and shaking her head, confirming all this bullshit, and the same with the presenters. What the hell does these people think? Is everybody in America or viewers of that program, are they all idiots? But let that be. And then we get to this thing from the US, because Geriatric Joe has appointed a new chief of staff. Listen to what this chief of staff says. Quota limits the number of white officers to 67% and cut white men down to 43%. The Air Force Officer Corps is currently 77% white, getting it down to 67%, a reduction of 10%, would require serious effort to purge white officers and bar the doors to any new ones. Reducing the number of white men in the officer corps to a minority, 43%, would cripple the service and wipe out generations of talent, especially when 86% of the pilots are white men. Look at that. Doesn't that sound a hell of a lot like South Africa? But then you must take into consideration, blacks is a minority, a huge minority in America. But that stupid Americans is allowing this shit, and they are going to pay for it. They must come to South Africa and just come and have a look at what is in their future. And then we get to South Africa, and I had to laugh. This is our Minister of Finance, Modise. We did not send fokol to Russia, not even a piece of chappies. The Minister of Defense said she was tired of the anti-Russian phobia in the country. Fact of the matter is, I laughed when I read it, but if you look at it critically, you can see it's not her first language. We did not send fokol. So we didn't send fokol, we sent something. But I don't think that's what she meant. South Africa's Defense Minister Thandi Modise has strongly criticized the narrative that the country has chosen a side in the Russia-Ukraine war. The Minister of Defense said she was tired of the anti-Russian phobia in the country. And I agree with that. And then I have this little chart for you. You can stop it if you want to check it and study it. They want Eskom to collapse, then they will own South African power and solar. This is the bigger picture. Reality is, it's part and parcel of all that oligarchs that I've been speaking about and the plan to pull down the republic. But these are the players. Look at them. And then we get to that what a fuck moment, and listen to this. This is absolutely shocking. Muslim men have raped at least 500,000 predominantly white girls in the UK alone in the last 40 years. Dr. Ella Hill, survivor of Pakistani grooming gangs. Think about that. Let it sink in. What a fuck is that? And then, as I have said in my previous news thing, I'm now including a back page for the men. Look at this. Today it's not an image, it's a little slideshow. Enjoy it. Hey, I like that blondie. It is a beautiful Russian girl. But on that note, have a great weekend. It's cold in the Lowveld, so we won't be having a braai. We will be sticking to the house. But thank you for your support. Thank you to all the subscribers. Thank you specifically to those that are supporting the channel financially. And for those that want to contribute a bit, there is a link in the description below this video where you can make a donation. And please share the thing. The likes and the shares is important. Great weekend.